If you have anybody out there.
Yeah,
There is the short term. That while we begin the hiring process, it's entirely possible that the hiring process could go a little longer than we hope. So we need to be prepared to work with the art. This is
No, you have to
good.
mute it.
Mute that. Yeah. And then we would have to discuss if there is an interest in hiring an interim. Before we go to the final. I'm not sure. I'm sure there's pros and cons to that, but bringing someone up to speed. To bring someone up to speed. It feels redundant. But for now, it is the interim plan is Ben in the administrator spot and Anders in the clerk treasurer spot. Good follow.
my. The thoughts I have on this is for an interim thing, of course, split the job duties. But I would hope the long term that the city manager we hire has the ability to do both and is qualified to do both. Because that fresh set of eyes, I would be curious after they come in and they work for 3 to 6 months and they get up to speed however long, what they thought. So I don't want, in other words, my preference, however it is done now temporarily, I mean, I would respect. But I just would want that person qualified to do both positions when they come in and that we don't narrow it down to the candidates because I'd want that fresh perspective to come in and view city operations and everything. And obviously, hopefully, it's going to be an experienced person that has been through operating and managing public entities before. And they're going to have, he or she will have their thoughts on things. And I preferred somebody that had those broad skills. If we narrow it down too much in advance when we do the search, and I think that was one of the questions, what do we do this just temporarily or long term? I'd hate to then not have somebody qualified to do both. I'd like to, I mean, and maybe it's easier in a search because there's more people qualified, but you just in that's all. However, that job is advertised, whether it's for, you'll come in and you'll do it, the separation part now, what we're doing. But they have the qualities to take that on if they do an assessment and think that it's cost effective to do so. And as far as, and I know we're not here to discuss whether or not we hire a separate person now, but hopefully we can find efficiencies. One of the things I think of is we're kind of a small town, and the more time you add employees, it gets very expensive. So we don't know what efficiencies we'll find, and hopefully whoever the other manager, the new manager, when they come in, city manager, I mean, they can just like their viewpoint. Here's the efficiencies I found. Here's what I would do. I don't know if I was clear or not.
Well, I kind of see this as two separate issues. I think as an administrator, you want to hire somebody who has a proficiency to know the job descriptions and the jobs of all of the people that are within their charge.
Yeah.
If they could do any of those jobs that they had to. As far as the day-to-day routine, I kind of like the idea of having somebody, do the financials separately. That would allow somebody to be a true city administrator. Somebody that could dedicate their time and energy to making sure that all the functions in the city are being handled and they're not being mired down by a perfunctory work that could be accomplished by somebody else.
Yeah, I get it. I see what you're saying.
Right, I think, yeah, I agree that you bring in somebody in, as a city administrator, that would have the skill set and the understanding to do any of the jobs, right?
Yeah,
But-
okay, so we're,
Yeah,
yeah,
so we're-
I think
we
I'm
agree
in
on that. We
agreement
agree
with
on
that.
that, yeah.
I mean, it sounds like, yeah,
And
I-
too.
that they have
Having
the
that-
skill
the
set.
100%.
And then that person can at some point say, hey, here, I think this or that, and you can listen
And
to
it is a
that.
new set of eyes, so yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, so.
No, so skill set, I'm primarily worried,
Mhm.
yeah, so
Sure.
I agree with what you're both saying.
And then the idea would be that would free up some overhead for some of the the task that Liana has been trying to get to, the outreach portion of it, just some different projects that
Yeah.
she had hoped at the time would come free, and it never did.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that we would have to refine the job description a little bit, especially as we move forward to see as any holes that we didn't anticipate pop up as far as tasks, anything that we just didn't anticipate. We can continue to work on that. This, which I think brings us to, I haven't heard any thoughts from you. Dave, I want to just steamroll through.
Last meeting, Dave said he didn't want to talk. What you got now, Dave?
But I wasn't gonna hold into that.
I think it's imperative that whoever we hire as a city administrator is able to do any of the functions that they are called to supervise. And so I agree with that.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Having said that, I think we need to make sure that when we make these adjustments to these job descriptions, that the ability for that city administrator to continue to do the budget, continue to do any of the things that it's currently within that description, is still available to that individual, and let that individual decide whether or not they want to take additional responsibilities within their job description and delegate those out to other sources within the staffing. That way, we aren't making decisions about how the city administrator is supposed to run her staff or his staff. We are allowing them to do the things that they see best in order to be able to do that. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with, well, no, I'm not gonna go there right now. I'll end it there.
Okay,
I think that what Dave said, that person having the flexibility is what I was after, and I think, and I don't see any of us disagreeing with that, but the way you said it was better than what I said, because you get a competent, good person, as we've had. Okay, you get a person in there, I just want them to be able to maneuver and to be able to run the office how they see fit. And have the flexibility and not be constrained by something we do. So, but in the caveats you mentioned could help.
Yeah, within
And maybe
the job-
those caveats are in there anyway, how you.
And within that job description, it allows them the flexibility to be able to move those particular tasks within the city staff, however they seem best fit for where we're at any given time.
So are you talking about the essential job duties of the clerk treasurer still remaining within the city administrator, and you're suggesting some of those could then be delegated to other staff members? So the one issue that I see with that is if you're delegating some of the responsibilities of the clerk treasurer wholly to some of the other staff, then the other staff should be compensated accordingly for it. And so that is why, if you look at the job description, those essential duties need to stay with that position, and they need to be responsible for that and can't wholly delegate it without having it be within someone else's job description and compensated for that work.
So if you have an assistant clerk treasurer, you can't delegate work.
I delegate
that
work
fall-
to
that
them.
fall-
I do. I delegate work to them,
Okay,
but overall, the responsibility is mine.
yes,
And so with changing the job description, that responsibility is wholly theirs. And so I guess I'm delegating now, and
Right.
what I'm saying is I don't have time to do it all. And so my suggestion is to separate out the job description, so some of those duties that are wholly mine as a responsible party for are then someone else's responsibility, I still have oversight, or the city administrator still has oversight of that position and reviewing responsibilities, but they're not wholly responsible for managing all of it.
See, in my, and in my interpretation of all that, the city manager needs to be responsible for those duties. How they delegate those duties out is all within their purview.
I'm looking at one point on the job description that kind of covers that. It says responsible for oversight of the city personnel and personnel system, including supervision of department heads, including scheduling, evaluation, staff, all of that. So basically, in the capacity as a city administrator, even though you're not actually doing the work, you're still responsible for all of it. So I think the way that the job description's put together, it kind of covers that.
But what? For the city administrator, yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
But it also includes the clerk treasurer duties. And so the discussion was, is the clerk treasurer duties, are any of the duties changing within that within that city administrator's decision or description?
Like they are now in the interim.
Right.
In the interim.
Is that split gonna is that split something that council wants to explore on a more permanent basis? To then go out and advertise for a separate position? Because right now you basically have a finance director and a city administrator combined in one.
Right.
And so this is to separate those two roles.
Which would be my desire, I would think.
But then it is two-sided. Not only would there be less duties on the administrator side, but freeing up time to take on additional, but then purely on the list of duties for the clerk treasurer. Complete.
I think as you previously stated, there are a lot of responsibilities or things that you'd like to have your fingers on that you don't have the time to do, right? And as a office administrator, or as a city administrator, you need to have your fingers in all of those things. You know, and if you've got, again, perfunctory responsibilities that are keeping you from doing that, we need to free you up. That's not that you'd still be responsible for those things, but you'd actually have somebody else doing the work.
Somebody else who's responsible for deliverables on those things, I think is the issue, right? It's not that you're not overseeing the work still to make sure that it, I'm saying you, but the person in that position. But the deliverables come from the clerk treasurer, and if we're making the clerk treasurer have these deliverables, then that person needs to be compensated for doing that. Because it's not just, hey, can you help me out because I'm busy with this, can you organize whatever, but it's actually they're responsible for making sure those deliverables are done. And then the administrator is overseeing that along with the other things. Is that, yeah, that's the way I see kind of the difference in the split from delegating to actually, you are the one who, the clerk is the one who, clerk treasurer has to do these things. Their deliverables are part of their job now.
Well, then hopefully that would negate the need to hire another person. The clerk treasurer would have specific duties that would free up some headspace for the administrator so that we then can get some more work out of the same amount of people.
Yeah, the clerk treasurer position is not like it has to be a different person. It can be someone else who holds a different position, right? We're not saying it has to be
Say that again.
we're not saying it has to be a separate person. We're splitting the job description, but someone could hold two positions.
Well, right now, this is all
The clerk treasurer is one position, that's what they're saying.
No, so what Lucy's saying is true though. So you could have a city administrator position and you can have the language in the city administrator position be such that it can be combined with other positions. So there's city administrator, public works directors, there's city administrator planners, there's city administrator finance directors. I mean, there's combinations all over the place. So you can separate out the job description for city administrator with other departments. And so if you wanted to, you could hire a person that is a city administrator and a clerk treasurer, and you have two different job descriptions. And then it also frees it up though to down the road, if you wanted to have two different people in those positions, you could. It would create flexibility. But the language typically is, when you have those split, when you have someone having those two positions, they get the city administrator salary.
So are we talking about when we pull the clerk treasurer duties out of the city administrator position? Are we talking about less pay then?
I thought about that, but the idea is that that person would have more headspace to do more administrator stuff. So with the idea that they would still earn that money, they would earn it in a different way.
Then I'd do less work doing different work. Things that would have been nice to have the space to do. When we keep saying what's gonna come off the plate so we can do this other thing, some of those things could get done now without taking something else off of the administrator's plate.
And also, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's one for one, that the next person just automatically assumes Leon's salary. There is a range in there.
So are we talking about replacing the deputy clerk treasurer then position with a clerk treasurer?
No, no,
What are we what is, Anders, what is your position right now?
Deputy clerk treasurer.
Thank you. So are we talking about hiring another clerk treasurer then?
no.
We talking about putting these additional responsibilities onto him then?
And you would earn more money.
And I'm looking at all of these positions, all of these things right now. What of these that are on here right now do you do?
That are on the memo piece.
It's what I am concerned with is you taking on additional responsibilities as the clerk treasurer and other things dropping off the radar, i.e. nuisances and all of those other things that are piled up on you. And this is not fair to do that. You know, I'm a little bit frustrated because, it doesn't seem fair to Ben and to Anders to pile these things onto them, knowing that they've got additional responsibilities already for the positions that they hold. And I think those need to, I think it really needs to be evaluated closer as to what kind of a workload you're putting on these two young men. And that's my gut feeling.
The extra duties are truly in the interim. So that was just to keep the process moving, keep City Hall running. And then, as Ben said, you know, he might want to throw his hat in the ring for that position and decide that that really is a lot of work, or we need to reevaluate what the job duties are. So, but I'm speaking for you. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, very willing to serve as your city administrator on an interim basis. For me, it is just that, it's very interim. This is not like a transition of power. This is how to keep the lights on, how to facilitate a process, this process that you're going for what the future structure might be. It could involve going out to a consultant agency so that they're doing interviews with you all to see really what is that core function that you're looking for in a city administrator. And so that the person that you're hiring at that stage is well suited to do that for you. and willing to explore that as an option, willing to help you get through the interim period if you want to go to advertisement right now and hold that open for a certain amount of time and then do your interviews. Somebody's got it's gonna be stressful. It's gonna be hair on fire. It's gonna be doing a lot. Some of the long range planning functions will slow down. We'll still do all the development review and we'll still keep up with that. Long range planning functions will slow down. I don't know for Anders what he's looking at in balancing his workload and his stress level. For me, I know that that's somewhere where it's gonna be still continuing on to keep the projects rolling that are rolling, but not bring on the new long range projects. And that's okay. And it's an interim basis and we'll figure out how to move forward. So
Here's a thought based on what I've heard and what you folks said. What about if we had a timeline? We said, hey, you know, because to be honest, only here a few more weeks. What if we had a short timeline and let's say, and I'm not getting ahead of to the next agenda item, but it does, I guess, or are we getting there? I don't want to get ahead of you because we're talking about the job descriptions and what going forward, but, and so then it's kind of overlapping into the other, and I don't want to get started on that, but my point was gonna be is what if there were a time limit, I get, for this, and my next comment does get into the next section, because can you say, in other words, I was worried about what he said about how some things would get slowed down. So can you have a two-tier process, say for 1 month, fine, we have an interim, and as we work with another agency, an outside agency for long-term stuff, if we evaluate it and maybe they have an interim that can come in for 4 months, how do we know if somebody just retired or whatever? But this is where his question on part 1 of the agenda also overlaps into part 2, and I'm reluctant to get into that. So that's why I'm
And then-
slowing myself down here.
To that point, Leona has already discovered some local agencies that could provide an interim administrator, local-ish.
Local people, not local company.
Yeah,
Right.
so maybe that, because and I don't know if this is his comment of being concerned about the workloads is part of part 1 or part 2, so you decide that, you're the Mr. Mayor, but I do have concerns there.
And I, first of all, I have no problem with either one of these young men being put into these positions, okay? I think they're both capable to do that, on an interim basis. I would feel more comfortable with them, with their knowledge base and the knowledge of the history of why we do things. Rather than bringing somebody in off the street and say, okay, now you're the city administrator. And then for them trying to learn the backstory. There is a lot of value in that. I am just concerned about the workload that these guys are gonna be taking on, because it's not gonna be easy. So I appreciate the fact that they're both willing to do that.
And
Dave, can I answer the question you kind of asked me a little bit too? You're right. A lot of this is not things that I'm currently doing. But also recognizing a lot of these are things that need to be done to keep lights on and keep projects. that have
Absolutely,
been-
absolutely.
And so in that understanding, kind of exactly what you're saying, what has been. What I feel I've been asked to do, and my desire is to help. Keep the city in a place where we can put the best person possible in that chair. Where it doesn't need to be a rushed process, but you as council and mayor have the ability to talk and decide what is best for that chair. And it's not like, well, we have to do it by this date or a timeline, or else the lights are gonna turn off. And so right now, is when we're talking the interim piece, that's what first I feel like we're at right now of like. And so that's there, and then I fully, the discussion of what's best next, is it a separate trip, all those things are part of this discussion, but the interim part is definitely like absolutely, and I wanna do what's best for the city in that piece, and so willing to do that right now.
And it's not an unusual situation. City of Cascade Locks found that their recruiting process dragged out a little bit, and they did have an interim director who had been interim director or administrator or GM at the port.
Mhm.
So there are people out there that have a skill set, especially if you can find the good ones that are local, that get it, you know, with the things that we're dealing with. There are options to make sure that we're not overworking someone, because you're right. Ben is the part, you know, he already wears two hats. I had to ask him to put on a third hat. That isn't sustainable for a long time for his health and for the city's health.
And that's why I suggested like, well, if we can look at that in two phases, we can say, hey, fine, well, for 1 month, that might be fine. And then, but if you look, what if it's a 6-month process? And then the things that don't get done, and we're already short-staffed at times, that's what I worry about. And so I would like to look at, I mean, if there are people out there, especially if they're local people, they're gonna come in and let people that are already doing good work continue on. They're not gonna disrupt things, we just have another body there to help us. So, you know, so can you have that interim part be 2 parts? Say, okay, for 1 month, we'll do this. And if what if a proper interim doesn't come available? Then you just extend that. But what if you find that person, they're local, they understand what's in the city, and we find that person easily, if, as you say, they're there.
And this is where we probably will start to bleed into the next agenda item. So
Okay,
I'll have to see if I can put a button on this. We are set up for the short term for the term we've been using, keep the lights on, keep the plates spinning. Without being so naive as to think that hiring the next administrator is going to be quick and in a timeline that works without a hired interim
okay.
administrator.
Yeah.
We need to be prepared for a lengthy recruitment, be pleasantly surprised if it's not, but be prepared to bring in a interim. So
I'm happy with
that said, you know, that's how we'll can kind of segue into the next agenda item. But the part that we needed to come out of this one is, are we comfortable with this division of duties? And so far, it sounds like yes. Definitely yes, and then some yes.
Well, even if we wound up hiring a city administrator that was willing to take on the other responsibilities, I think it's kind of important to have those job descriptions separated.
I can be sold on the fact that it's gonna have all the skill set, because this is not cast in stone permanent. If we
Right.
find a candidate long-term that we like, and they came to us and they said, hey, I've evaluated this for 6 months, this is what I do. And we agree with that person, then, but the part that makes me comfortable is that they'll have the skill set to handle those things. That's what I was worried about. But if need be.
Yeah, I think a qualified candidate for a city administrator would absolutely be able to handle those tasks, yeah, so.
Okay, agenda item number 2.
Yeah.
When we went through the recruitment phase for Liana, it was organic. Because you could call it that. We posted that we are looking for a city administrator with these skills and just put it out here. And then did we have, oh, you weren't here for that part. I think we put it on different boards too with AWS. We cast a net, but we didn't hire a consultant to get our candidates in. We got 4 candidates and very strong, and then we got a Liana. The time before that, the city did go through a consultant, and they can cast a wider net, but and Ben can expand on this a little more, because that was before I was mayor is they can focus in on when city council goes, well, strong financial background. Okay, well then now as they start to do their own pre-filtering of candidates before they trot out what's left, finance, and you might not get someone with a strong municipal background or some of those other traits that we might be looking for. So there's pros and cons and pitfalls to both of them. I do want Ben's thought because he's been here the longest on how that process, and when Robert was here too. So there's the danger of not getting a candidate if you do it the organic way, for lack of a better word, or the consultant. If you go the consultant route, you might get what they think you want, as opposed to what we know what we want. So there's both sides to that. So I wanted to start with Robert. You were on city council for that.
Yeah, we used Prothman when we found Nick. We did not get the ideal candidate. We got a finance guy. We did not get a manager. Prior to that, he'd been at the school board in Hood River. I think we had 4 candidates that we interviewed at that time. Ironically, as the council went through its ups and downs, the number 1 got moved to the number 4 at the final vote. It was a good discussion amongst the council members at the time, including Dave or Frank. The second go round, obviously it was sort of like it fell in our lap. We were interviewing some people and then happened to be here. I mean, well, she had to be in White Sand, so we were able to poach her more or less. So we got lucky. Quick aside, I know City of Battleground just recently hired their new city administrator, who actually came up through the ranks, but there was 4 candidates that they interviewed. They went internal and hired her. $208,000 annual salary with benefits beyond that. If you go with Prothman, you're gonna spend 150, 175.
I'll come out of retirement.
Just tell them, that's the economics right
Do we
now.
vote on that now or later?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I thought the first process that we did with Prothman, we got a lot of people came in and interviewed that were all like, interesting human being, doesn't fit personality wise. The organic side, I thought the conversation was better on the personality side than it was when we hired for Nick. And I thought, didn't Mary she didn't stick around. We went in her own.
Mary Ann?
Yeah, Mary Ann.
She stuck around.
She did.
And
Oh, there's
there was a
overlap.
month overlap.
Yeah, she actually
Okay.
stayed and helped transition Nick
retiring.
in
But we had a very abrupt departure
with Nick.
with Nick.
Yeah.
I think, Carla was there for a month, was a
Carlos
month and a
was
half.
And Carla was still there.
Yeah, yeah.
Between Nick and Leon, Carla was the interim.
My experience with Prothman, so I was a city council member in White Salmon, and we hired our first city administrator, public works director as well, and we used Prothman too. And our experience was similar as far as like the candidates we got were, they were okay, but they weren't the quality caliber. We went with a city administrator that didn't have, he had a lot of public works experience, I think, and some administrator experience. And then when we used them again to hire for a different position, same thing, they gave us what we thought we wanted.
Right.
And that person lasted a couple of years, and then someone that came in for that position after them said, hey, I applied. We never saw his application in the process, and he had all of the experience, had all of the qualifications, and would have been a great candidate the first time around, but we never saw it. So that's one of the concerns, depending on how you work the scope of work and depending on who you have as the consultant, to make sure that if you want to see all of the applicants that you do, so that you can vet them as well as the agency.
Well, and the thing with Prothman is you will get candidates from Nevada and
Yeah.
Arizona.
Yeah.
Just because he casts that wide net. I mean, I get his emails when he sends them out, looking for new county council and this place here. And I'm always like, that's a lot of money to go live in the San Juan Islands. But that's the problem is as a candidate, you'll see a Prothman ad and you go, oh, I'm just gonna apply. And yet it's not really a fit. And then they do gatekeep those first sets of resumes, and like I said, because we don't know who was behind the curtain that we didn't get to see the first time with Brockman. The nice thing with Leona is we saw all of the applications. But we had a little longer pull, right? Didn't we? Cause there was a gap between Nick and Leona.
No, it was only a month.
It was a month and a half. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't 6 months, it wasn't six
No.
months when we hired Nick in too either, so, but it's two completely different avenues.
Well, and right now you have the labor challenges of, a shortage of finance directors.
Yeah.
That is, endemic, as well as, a challenge finding city administrators too, so.
So is that a reason then to do a wider net because we need to, or?
Well, I mean, once you find someone, where are they gonna live?
Yeah.
That
It's,
would be no matter what, we'll have that problem, right?
It wasn't there.
right, right.
I mean, Nick lived in Hood River, then rented a place in town and then moved to Portland, so,
Yeah.
Nick was struggling to find a foothold.
Yeah, okay, I get what you mean.
If anything, it would be a reason to separate the positions. But, yeah. It's up to council.
So I teased Ben's input. Do you have some thoughts on how that went?
You know, it really just underscores what Leona said. So Marianne, started here in the late eighties. She was city administrator until 2013 or 14. And so her arc and her management is where this all came from. So she came in as a clerk treasurer, she excelled, and so they changed it. And so she continued on as the clerk treasurer and was titled the city administrator also. Marianne also came into work at 4 a.m. and stayed until 6 p.m. So when I'm talking about the process of going with the headhunting firm, the first time, there was a very good public process, interviewing the city council members, interviewing staff members, interviewing community members about how are we going to replace her, what's important. That process gave everyone faith that things would go well moving forward, but the process didn't really look at the problems of this job description that Leona's tried to lay out in the memo, that it's too much. So I think my take on it was that the consultant said, yeah, that's too much. We did all these interviews and understand what's important, but really they prioritize those interviews with the council members making that decision. And so they didn't really look at that staffing structure. They didn't look at a job description effort that's gonna provide the successful person for the city of Stevenson. They looked at a successful completion of this hiring process and
Can I ask a question? I think what we're talking about here is, do we use an outside help, whether it's Prothman or whatever, or if we use the organic method? The organic method seems like that's all on us and all on the staff when we need help. In other words, the labor of this search, where does that fall? Where does a lot of that fall? And to me, we've already given help to the staff. We already given additional work to the interim staff, and we don't know how long that interim is, whether it's a month or 2 months or 6 months, because that could change if we find an interim if we feel we need to. So to me, we need, if we, some search agent of all those entities that have been mentioned, if we hire one of them to help us, they're doing the bulk of the work to help us in there. And like when Ben mentioned that they're finding out what are your needs and they're interviewing and they're learning about the community, the search person, the outfit, they're doing a lot of work that we'll have to do ourselves if we don't have that agency. So if it gets down to, do we hire outside help in the search or not? If that's the question before us, I mean, my thought is we need the help. Whether Prothman is the best or whether the other ones that Leanna mentioned, there's better ones. Because now I realize, and I listened very carefully to what Robert said, in the end, we still got to pick the right one. That's going to be on us whether we have help or not. We can't be fooled or have.
the nuance that I was trying to get to, some there was the exact conversation that you already had. That's making a decision about whether you're hiring somebody, and that somebody will come in, like you suggested, Pat, in 6 months, they'll have an idea of how they can build a team around themselves. And you all are comfortable with that and expecting changes to all the job descriptions based on that. Or whether you're looking for a consultant to come in right now, really tighten down a specific profile that you want to hire to, so that you don't go through all those things in the future. That's one of those things that to
Yeah,
grab.
it's a real nuance,
Yeah,
yeah. And I guess to me, I would throw this back to you and to you. How you feel that as an interim or as the clerk treasurer, how do you feel about being in charge of looking for your boss? Knowing full well that they could come in and literally change the culture, if you will, of how the city operates as far as the staff goes. How do you feel about knowing that, I've got these candidates? One of these candidates is gonna come in and they're gonna tell me, Ben, I don't like this particular part about how you do your job. You're gonna do it this way, or, Anders, you need to do 5 more things over here. How do you feel about knowing that you are in charge of finding that person? That seems like, to me, that seems like a lot of pressure to put on you two with already the amount of pressure that you have to keep the lights running.
Just, before Ben answered it, we did do that process. That now I remember why we went 4 to 1, 1 to 4, was we brought the staff in and had them actually give us their feedback on the candidates. So I remember we had ranked them 1 to 4, and then after we heard from the staff, it literally went 4 to 1. It got turned on its head,
And we did that
because we listened to the staff.
with Liana, when we went through the interview process. We had city council in the room, and I don't think we had all of staff, or did we? At least city, there was quite a few staff on hand. And even though staff couldn't vote, they still had input that
took their
was
input.
valuable. So, and before Ben answers, you have to anticipate that there's gonna be change. You can't expect that someone's gonna
Absolutely.
come
You
in
would
and
hope.
just, you would hope.
You would hope. that
And
there's
that's why
going to be-
input from staff is so key to expect that. And then if you're part of the process to make sure that it's a good fit. But now I'm speaking for you guys again.
There is gonna be change. There's always change with this. The team is so small that it's gonna change quickly. I had no problem participating in that review with the Rothman as that firm and being involved there. It's not something that scares me. It's also in going through this isn't something that Anders and I are doing. This is something that we're all doing.
Right, yes.
So I'm not concerned about that, or that there's gonna be animosity created by it. I think we're carrying the torch so that we can pass it on to the next person. This isn't us making him the next king. This is all of us working together to find something that's gonna work.
and I think the question still gets back to, do we hire outside help? One of these agencies to help us and assist us? That's just something I'm in.
And I guess
favor
that would
of.
be my question back to you two. What do you see most beneficial?
Consulting support,
Pardon?
consulting support of some sort,
Of some sort.
Maybe not that model, but
Yeah, making sure that the deliverables from that consultant are suiting our needs.
Are really what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, I can't remember which council member mentioned it, but the staff load, but the load for all that to be on us, as well as like picking up the extra duties, would be a lot. So the consulting support would be, very beneficial.
It's critical.
Also with that understanding that there was going to be working as a team with you guys and us, and like getting input and I've not been a part of a process with a consulting firm like that before, so. New to me and there, but definitely like I would want to have. To be able to give input, to be listened to and input so that. And asking questions about what's needed in that chair, like what issues and things we'd be looking for in the person hiring, and so I would appreciate that as an employee.
And maybe the thing to protect, I mean, I think what Dave might have been getting at is, well, things get into. Is there potential conflict of interest in that, well, you're hiring your boss? Well, a way around that might be that the interim staff that are here don't weed out any of the applicants, that those be somebody on the council or the mayor. In other words, they're not picking who that person is or helping it. They're not making the selection. The council and mayor are making the selections. So then you don't get into that. Well, that person here, they said their application says that they said this and that bothers me. So I'm not gonna, in other words, I'm gonna weed them out and say, here's your top.
I don't think. Ben staff for a bit, that is not how we do our.
No, that's so
process,
this.
And they would never
No,
do something like that, so.
And I'm not suggesting that. I'm just trying to say is that.
That's, and Pat, I get where you're coming from on that. I don't think that would be. I don't see that actually as part of their process because.
Right, that's all I'm talking about.
They're coming up with applicants and then we all talk about it together. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think that.
In the process, I don't think that would be an option, but I agree, I know what you're saying, so.
Yeah.
I don't think that's gonna
Right.
be,
Yeah.
wouldn't be a concern. And Dave,
We haven't heard much from.
Dave,
Mike.
I've hired, well, I come from an HR background. I hired my own boss twice. I did the interviews for my own boss. So I've done this and I've worked with firms, not these specific firms, but I've worked with outside firms. I've worked with temp agencies. I've worked with doing it organically and trying to find other businesses that are the same and headhunting. I've done all of those things in the past. And I think that in the space we're in, I think that some kind of consulting help is absolutely needed. Because because I'm not on staff as the HR person. And so that's a big job. It really is. And so that's not, I think that it is important to have some kind of backup on that. And I think it's also extremely important to make sure that we do give the staff a voice on what kind of when the applicants come in and talk. Obviously, yeah, you're right, they won't have a vote, but having a voice on someone that they'll work very intimately with, that we see a few times a month and they see every day, all day. So that's kind of my take.
I'll add one more piece if I can. We get to a point where we start talking to a consultant about what kind of a person we're looking for in an administrator. I think it's kind of important that we've separated out the administrative role from some of the clerk treasurer role. Just that I think it's important to realize that when you're hiring an administrator, that's a totally different skill set than somebody that has a set of experiences dealing with certain types of responsibilities within that office. And being worried about somebody coming in and changing everybody's jobs and hopefully if you get the right kind of person with a good administrative skill set, they're going to be a team builder. And they're going to want to come in and they're going to want to assess where people's skills are and get their input on how to best place their responsibilities. So in talking to a consultant, I think it's important for us to say we're looking for somebody who's got strong administrative skills and knows how to work with a team. Because job duties are something you can pick up really quickly. I shouldn't say, immediately, but you can pick up the perfunctory pieces of how to do something over a relatively short period of time. But getting somebody who's a good administrator, that's a skill set that you can't teach.
Yeah, I agree. This is one person.
So the next trick is how to pick the agency. Is, like I said, it might not have to be that model, but we all agree that some paying someone to take on those duties is important.
Set of next steps in my mind would be. Me having conversations with you all individually about what you want to see that company produce. So that we have a set of deliverables, a scope of work that we can go out and get quotes from companies for. This is what we want. Can you do that? What's the cost of that? And then presenting that cost to you, or presenting the combined effort to you. To see if that's the set of deliverables you want to see.
That complicates it more than I think we need to, in my mind. I mean, I think we have a short timeline. I mean, I think, I'm just curious what Leanna thinks about any of those people. Leanna, if you had to choose one of them, what's your gut on, or you're educating, whatever, who would you pick if you were in charge of giving us a recommendation of the people you listed? Who would you pick?
SGR.
Why don't-
Their basis is servant leadership, and they do a lot in that space. And they have interim consultants and other types of support as well. And they also offer a lot of training.
I'd be happy with that.
I don't know their prices though.
I know.
That's the other thing,
Yeah,
so.
and what, the reason I
But
say
they
that is,
also, they do, so they're based out of Texas, but they do a lot of work in Washington and other states as well, so.
yeah, I'm just trying to say, these people are somewhat qualified. That's who. I would rather we hire a company and they come and talk to each of us, what are you looking for? Rather than we do that twice, is what I'm saying, and if that's who you would pick. I mean, I'm just saying that I as one council member would be, and sure, maybe we have to council need to deliberate more than just, I'm just one person. But I would say, okay, then let's, I would trust that and say, let's, because it's gonna be a long process even with them. And get them hired and on board. And let's talk about money for a second. Let's say it's expensive. Any of them are gonna be expensive. We know that. But it's also, it's gonna be expensive if we get this wrong. I mean, running a city is expensive. So I as one know that I don't wanna be penny wise and pound foolish. I know whoever we get as a good administrator is probably not gonna be cheap. But I know that a good agency, hopefully, if this goes well, they would have earned their keep at the end. So just as a good manager, whatever that costs us, will earn its keep at the end. So, anyway.
Yeah, real quick. You mentioned, and you're totally right, like this is gonna be, it's not gonna be a short process, it could take a while. And I would think just in your talking about how you select which firm you wanna go with. All the more important, don't skip a 2 to 3 week step. That could set you back a month or 2 months, because that far in, you realize, oh, we didn't know this about the company really wasn't the one we liked. We would have rather gone with someone else.
Yeah.
It seems like making sure we don't skip any steps to make sure that
Yeah.
each step of the way we're doing the thing that's best. It would be really important, so making sure that we've gotten quotes for price and have a company that is going to serve us as we need. Being that, there's not been any experience with the city in hiring someone for over 7 years.
Yeah.
It would be important to just at least take those baseline.
Yeah.
Interviews.
And that's basically my thought process on this, is that we have something in place that's going to keep the lights on a temporary basis. I want to make sure that when we move forward, we're moving forward in the right direction. We've crossed our T's, dotted our I's. And, you know, if Ben feels like as the interim that he wants to sit down and interview council members to get a feel for what they're looking for prior to the process of, you know, you talking to the consultant and the consultant coming in and talking to us. I think there's value in that. if nothing else, it will give both of you, if you're part of that process of like interviewing each one of us, that'll give you insight as to where we personally want to see the city go. And I think that's crucial as far as you continuing in whatever positions you continue after we find a city administrator, so,
Yeah,
anyway.
I just think we got Leanna here for 2 or 3 more weeks. It just seems like a
We can
city
start-
manager function.
We can
I-
start, we
I
can
would
start
trust-
that process.
I would trust, I'm just trying to say is I'd like the city manager now to have that function, not put that on the staff. It seems unfair. But when you talked about Ben and these people, we're putting them more in a position of hiring their boss and finding out what we need. When I guess I just would want, during the transition part, I would feel more comfortable if Leanna served that function and helped us weed out who that company was gonna be.
Well, she could,
As opposed to putting it on Ben and Anders, who already have a learning curve. That's why I was pushing, I feel most comfortable with
So,
Leanna.
What we can do, we can get together based on the conversations that we just heard now, and come up with a draft scope of work for the next meeting. That can then be shopped around to the other agencies, and I can make some preliminary calls to see what they do for other agencies if they have kind of and I can also reach out to, Algraph even, to see, what they did and who they used and what services they had, so.
Yeah, and part of it is, I don't know if it would be productive. I can just say, for me, I don't feel it'd be productive. I would feel uncomfortable being candid with the staff over what I thought the future of Stevenson should look like. I think that puts me in an uncomfortable position that I would not really want to be in. Okay, speaking for myself.
Chuck? Thoughts?
I've said my thoughts.
Okay, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, we need to hire I mean, I think we're all in agreement on what we need, how we get there is really the only real discussion, and I'm okay with however the staff feels like we need to find that correct firm. So if they want to talk to me about what I am looking for, I'm fine with that. If they come up with the deliverables that we talk about at the next meeting and they start shopping different companies, I'm okay with that. Whatever, I'll trust the staff on this part to come up with how we get to point B from point A. We all agree on what point B is. How we get there, I'm trusting the staff on what they want to do.
Lucy?
I have nothing to add to what Michael said.
Yeah, I trust at the next meeting we will have some options.
Any other thoughts before I gavel us out of here? Sharpen tooth break as a preface to a statement?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No, just, SGR's got a listing for City of Stanfield, which is just up 84. I actually got a case going there right now. So they're looking for a city manager as well as Centralia, and Centralia is going through profit. So,
Right, so there's options, yeah.
yeah, well, Stanfield's a lot smaller than Centralia, but
Mhm.
you know, at least you know that both of these companies are working in the state of Washington.
Actively working right now.
I mean,
for that
Brockman is
position.
out of Issaquah, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're in 4 states if they do.
Meeting adjourned, 7:37. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck, you guys.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Dave.
More minutes.